I still see her gaze, even today, the last gaze. When she was taken, there were no goodbyes. I couldn't touch her, couldn't even scream. All that remained was that gaze. I was so small, but it stayed, like a mark that never heals, like a fire that burns but doesn't consume. She was there, in front of me, with that look of someone who knew everything would end. But I didn't know. I didn't know that would be the last moment we'd spend together. And to this day, I wonder, what was she thinking? What did she feel? Where did she go? Why did she leave me without me being able to do anything? These questions haunt me to this day. But the greatest pain is not knowing if, somehow, she also looked for me. Time has passed, but the weight of that gaze remains like a shadow. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, about that gaze and what happened next. Since I can remember, my mother's presence was all I knew of love. I remember the nights when the cold wind would seep through the cracks in the cabin, and she would pull me close, pressing me against her chest, covering me with the warmth of her body. It was a warmth I never felt anywhere else, not even in the scorching sun that burned the skin in the mornings. To me, she was the source of everything that made sense. It was her voice that calmed me, her simple words, full of a love I didn't fully understand, but felt in every gesture, every touch, the afternoons in the fields, when she'd take my hand and teach me to look at the earth, the sky, the stars at night. Even at that young age, I knew the world had something more, something I couldn't see, but that my mother knew well. The smell of her hair, her discreet smile, the way she looked toward the horizon as if there, where the sky met the earth, was some kind of secret. Even during the hard times, when the work in the fields dragged on like an endless curse, she found the strength to smile, to tell me things would get better. To me, she was the strongest person who ever lived. She could make the pain disappear with a word, with a gesture, with a simple smile. I believed in her more than I believed in everything around me, the system we were subjected to, the brutality surrounding us, the rules of the game no one could challenge. All of it seemed small in the face of the strength she radiated. It was as if, in her gaze, hope was always renewed, a hope that gave me strength to carry on. Even in the darkest moments, my only wish was to stay by her side, to learn everything she had to teach me, to absorb every word, every lesson I didn't know. At the time, what was coming, I didn't know that my mother's love, so strong, so unshakable, would be torn from me with a violence I never imagined possible. In the days leading up to what happened, something in the air changed. I felt it, though I didn't understand that something was about to happen, something no one could prevent. The hushed conversations between the adults, the furtive glances exchanged among the men around us, it all seemed to conspire against us. I remember being at the cabin door, planning with a piece of wood, and looking at her, who watched me from afar, as if she knew the end was near. But at the same time, there was something in her eyes that told me, no matter what happened, she would always be with me. At that moment, I couldn't imagine it would be the last day she'd be by my side. When they finally came, I was so confused, so lost in my own thoughts. I didn't comprehend what was happening at first. I didn't believe what my eyes were seeing. I thought it was just another one of those situations that would resolve, like all the others I had lived through. But when I heard the shouting, the orders, saw the fear on people's faces, the panic that spread so quickly, my heart began to race, and what seemed impossible started becoming reality. They weren't just taking my mother, they were taking a part of me. I screamed, ran to her, my steps muffled by the heavy earth, but it was useless. By the time I reached her, The men were already holding her arms, keeping her from moving. The fear she tried to hide became evident, but for some reason, she didn't look at me with sadness. She looked at me with something else, with a silent acceptance, as if she already knew what was to come. I held her hand, tried to pull her close, but the men were too strong. The pain I felt wasn't just physical, it was a deep, gnawing feeling of helplessness that consumed me from the inside out. I watched her expression change, but it was quick. In that instant, our gazes met, and the whole world seemed to stop. Her gaze, full of sadness and resignation, wasn't just a goodbye. It was a silent scream, a plea for me to survive, for me to find the strength she always knew I would have. That moment, that gaze, became indelible in my soul. I can no longer think of her without remembering that last look. She never said a word, but in that gaze, I felt everything she couldn't say. I felt the love, the pain, the fear, the longing. I felt that she was giving me something much greater than anything material. I didn't know at that moment, but that gaze would be what kept me alive, what would give me strength when everything around me crumbled. The world, in its brutality, had torn my mother from me, but in that gaze, she left me something that could never be taken away, something I would never forget, something that would define me for the rest of my life. I still didn't understand what was happening. The confusion took over me like a storm, and everything around me became a blur of sounds and quick movements. The heat of the sun was suffocating, but the feeling I had was of a freezing cold that ran through my bones. I didn't understand, but something inside me told me that the life I knew was breaking apart. I still felt my mother's fingers in my hand, trying to keep me close to her, but the men who arrived with their orders and shouts were stronger than anything I had ever known. The weight of the chains that held them, the weight of the hands that were separating us, it all seemed to swallow me whole. I wanted to scream, run, do something, anything, but my feet were stuck to the ground, and the force holding me was greater than my will. She looked at me, in that moment, with an expression that cut me more than any word could. There was no longer a smile on her face, no longer that sparkle of hope that had always been there. Like a flame that never goes out, fear was there, yes, but there was also something I couldn't identify until that moment. She looked at me, and in that gaze, I saw what seemed to be an acceptance, as if she somehow knew that nothing could be done, that it was inevitable, and that she would have to go. Fear began to take over me, but I still didn't fully understand the gravity of it. I tried to pull her back, but nothing worked. It was like trying to hold a river slipping through my fingers. I saw others trying to stop them, saw my mother's desperate struggle, but it was all in vain. She was being taken, and no matter how much I cried, no matter how hard I tried to embrace her with all the strength of a child who doesn't know what to do, nothing changed. It was then that I realized, deep in my tear-filled eyes, that the last thing I could do for her was simply let her go. But that thought ripped me apart inside. How could I let my mother go without even saying goodbye? How could I allow her to be taken from my life without even having the chance to fight for her? But the truth was, in that moment, I had no power. I had no strength. I was just a child, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. When she was taken, the ground beneath my feet seemed to vanish. The earth that once felt firm now became an abyss, and I fell. The sensation of falling was as real as the air I was breathing. I felt the emptiness inside me grow, a pain so deep that it seemed impossible to endure. I looked where my mother had gone, but there was no one there anymore. The dust spread, the sounds of the struggle faded, and the world that once seemed understandable and solid became incomprehensible. I was alone, Or at least it seemed so. In that moment, amid the chaos and loss, I began to feel the weight of reality. The reality that what had just happened was something that couldn't be undone. I tried to run after her, but the chains the men had put on me stopped me. I was trapped, not just physically, but emotionally. It was as if a part of me had been torn away and taken, and I didn't know how to put myself back together. The others around me seemed as powerless as I did. Their faces mirrored my pain, but no one could do anything. All that was left was the image of my mother being taken, and that gaze. I knew she was going to a place where there would be no return, and the pain of that realization spread through my chest like poison. When she was gone, something inside me changed forever. It wasn't just the loss, but the fact that I knew I would never see her face again, hear her voice, feel the soft touch of her hands. The separation was more than physical. It was something that pierced me and left a mark I would carry for the rest of my life. I was directionless, lost, but that gaze, it never left me. It was with me, becoming part of my soul, reminding me, with every moment that passed, that my mother had left me without me being able to do anything to stop it. I stood there, looking at the emptiness, until the sound of reality brought me back. The world kept spinning. After she was taken, everything changed. I was left behind, alone in a world I didn't understand. The days stretched on, but nothing felt the same. I could no longer feel the warmth of her hand in mine, or hear her voice calling me. Even when I closed my eyes and tried to remember, the nights became the hardest. The silence was deafening, and the emptiness that took root in my chest seemed to grow larger with each passing day. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling of the small shack, my mind replaying the last moments I spent with her, the image of her face, that look in her eyes. It haunted me. The world outside moved on, but I was stuck in time, trapped. In that moment of loss, every corner of that place reminded me of her. The patch of dirt where we used to sit together, the tree she would point to and say was as old as time itself. All of it was now nothing but a painful reminder of what had been ripped away from me. I couldn't focus on anything anymore. My hands trembled as I worked, my thoughts always drifting back to her. Every sound, every movement felt like a cruel reminder that she was gone. And the worst part, I didn't know where she had gone or if she was even still alive. The uncertainty gnawed at me and ached deeper than anything I had ever known. The other slaves, they tried to comfort me, but their words were hollow, their eyes just as broken as mine. None of us had any power. None of us could change what had happened. We were all helpless. I tried to keep my mind occupied with work, but my body moved on its own, a machine without purpose. I would hear others talk about their families, about how they would hold on to memories of their mothers or fathers, but I had nothing. No memories, no stories, just the pain of her absence. And with each day that passed, the pain grew heavier, like a weight I couldn't lift. My heart felt like it was slowly being crushed, and no matter what I did, there was no escaping it. The only thing that kept me going, the only thing that gave me any strength, was the thought of her. I kept telling myself that she wouldn't want me to give up, that she wouldn't want me to lose myself in grief. But that didn't make it any easier. The sadness was like a shadow that followed me everywhere, and no matter how much I tried to shake it off, it was always there, lingering. In the quiet moments, when the others were asleep, I would let the tears fall. I had to. It was the only way to release the pain, to try to understand the depth of the emptiness inside me. I could still feel her, but it wasn't enough. I needed her presence, her guidance. I needed to hear her voice telling me that everything would be alright. But there was nothing, just silence. I had lost not just a mother, but the only thing in this world that ever gave me hope. I felt like a part of me had been ripped out, and there was no way to fill the hole. No matter how much time passed, no matter how much I tried to bury the pain, it was always there, a constant ache in my soul. I wasn't sure how to live without her. How could anyone survive such a loss? How could I keep going when everything that made sense had been taken from me? I don't know how, but I did. I had to. But even as the days and years went on, the wound she left never healed. It festered inside me, a constant reminder of the love I had lost and the world I had been forced to live in. But I kept going, just as I told myself I would. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the world seemed far away, I would close my eyes and remember her. The feel of her touch, the sound of her voice, the love in her eyes. And I would tell myself that no matter how much time passed, no matter what happened, she would always be with me. The pain didn't go away, but in those moments, I could feel her again, just a little, and that little bit of her was enough to keep me going, to keep me alive. Asterisk if you're feeling the weight of these words, I ask you to remember them and perhaps subscribe. Let's keep her memory alive, even in small ways. The days that followed her departure were long, stretching on endlessly, and I began to reflect on everything that had happened. It wasn't just the loss of my mother that consumed me. It was the guilt. I couldn't shake it, couldn't stop. The thought that maybe, just maybe, there was something I could have done. I was a child, yes, but wasn't there something, some way I could have stopped it? If only I had been stronger. If only I had run faster or screamed louder. Perhaps if I had fought harder, things would have been different. These thoughts tortured me, and I carried them like a weight I couldn't put down. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying the events over and over again, analyzing every moment, every second. I kept asking myself, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I protect her? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was just a child, powerless in a world that didn't care about the pain of someone like me. Yet, the guilt still gnawed at me, a constant companion that wouldn't let me rest. There were times when I felt like a coward. I was too weak, too afraid to stop the men from taking her. It wasn't just the physical strength that I lacked, it was something deeper, something that went beyond my control. It was the realization that, in that moment, I didn't have the power to change anything. I had failed her. In my heart, I knew it wasn't true. I knew I was just a boy who loved his mother with everything he had. But the guilt clouded my thoughts, making it hard to accept that there was nothing I could have done. It wasn't until much later that I began to understand something. The guilt wasn't mine to carry. It was the weight of a world that had broken me, a world that had taken everything I loved without reason or remorse. It was the system of slavery, the cruelty of the men who had come to take her, who had taken everything from me. It wasn't my fault, but even when I understood this on an intellectual level, it didn't stop the emotional storm that raged within me. I still blamed myself. I still wondered what would have happened if I had been stronger. If I had known what to do, maybe then she wouldn't have been taken from me. Maybe I could have kept her safe. But those were just empty hopes, things I had told myself to try and find peace, to try and make sense of the senseless. But the truth was, no matter how much I tried to justify it, no matter how many times I told myself I couldn't have stopped it, the pain remained. It remained deep in my soul, like an open wound that never healed. And so, I carried the guilt with me through every day and every night. The weight of it never went away. I tried to bury it, tried to pretend it didn't, exist, but it was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to remind me of what I had lost. There were times when I tried to talk to others about it, but the words never felt right. How could I explain to someone else that I felt responsible for something I couldn't control? How could I make them understand that my heart was broken, not just from the loss, but from the weight of the guilt that I couldn't escape? I never found the answers I was looking for, and in the end, I realized that maybe the answers didn't matter. Maybe the only thing that mattered was surviving, carrying on, even when the guilt seemed too much to bear. Because no matter how much I blamed myself, no matter how much pain I carried, I still had to keep going. I had to survive. For her, I had to live a life that would honor her memory, even if it meant living with that pain forever. The guilt never went away, but eventually, I learned to live with it. And maybe that was the best I could do, to live with the guilt, but also to live with the love I had for her, because that was the one thing no one could ever take from me. As the years passed, the pain of losing her didn't fade. Instead, it transformed into something else. It became a search for answers, for meaning, for anything that could make sense of the injustice that had been done. I began to question everything, the system, the world I had been forced to live in, and most of all, myself. What was the point of all this? Why had I been chosen to live this life, to suffer in such a way? Why had I been left behind while she was taken from me with no explanation, no justification? These questions gnawed at me, relentless, and I sought answers wherever I could. I spoke to others, to the older ex-slaves who had lived through their own tragedies, hoping to find something that would make sense of my suffering. Some of them had stories of survival, of finding small bits of peace after years of pain. Others, though, had been broken by the system, their spirits crushed beyond repair. I listened to them all, hoping that somehow I would find the answer I was looking for. But no one seemed to have the answers. No one could explain why the world worked the way it did. They all spoke of survival, of finding a way to keep going, despite the endless suffering. But no one could offer a reason for why we had to suffer in the first place. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that perhaps there was no answer. Perhaps the world was simply a cruel place, and we were just meant to endure it, to survive it, to keep going until the day we died. But even as I tried to accept this, something inside me rebelled. I couldn't just accept that there was no meaning to life, no reason for any of it. The loss of my mother, the pain I had endured, it couldn't have been for nothing. It couldn't have been a senseless tragedy. There had to be something more. I began to look for meaning in small things, in the little acts of kindness that still existed in the world, in the fleeting moments of beauty that could be found even in the darkest places. I tried to find meaning in the people I met, in the stories they told, in the love they shared, but it wasn't easy. The world had been so harsh, so unforgiving, that it was hard to see anything but the suffering. But as time went on, I began to realize that maybe meaning wasn't something that could be found in the world around me. Maybe it was something I had to create for myself, something I had to find within myself. I began to understand that the search for meaning wasn't about finding answers from others, or even from the world itself. It was about finding a way to live with the pain, to carry the loss without letting it destroy me. I realized that I could still honor my mother's memory, still keep her with me, even if I couldn't change the past. I could find meaning in the way I lived, in the choices I made, in the love I gave to others. It wasn't much, but it was something, and that something, small as it was, gave me the strength to keep going. The search didn't stop the pain, but it gave me a reason to keep moving forward. It gave me a way to live with the loss without letting it consume me. And that, in itself, was a victory, because even though the world had taken my mother from me, it couldn't take away my ability to find meaning in my own life. It couldn't take away the love I still carried for her. And it couldn't take away the strength I had to keep living, to keep surviving. Maybe that was the greatest answer I would ever find. The answer was within me all along. The meaning, the purpose, was not in the world that had taken so much from me. It was in the way I chose to live, the way I chose to honor my mother's memory, and the way I chose to move forward, even in the face of endless pain. As time went on, the pain of my past didn't go away, but it began to change. I couldn't keep running from it, trying to escape it, pretending it wasn't there. It was a part of me, a scar that would never heal, but it was also a part of what made me who I was. I stopped trying to erase the memories, to bury the feelings of loss and guilt that had haunted me for so long. Instead, I started to accept them, to embrace the pain, and to understand that it wasn't something that could be fixed or taken away. It was something I had to live with, something that would always be there, but didn't have to control me. Acceptance wasn't easy. For so long, I had fought against the pain, had tried to outrun it, and every time I failed, I felt weaker, more broken. But eventually, I realized that fighting the pain only made it worse. It was only by facing it head on, by allowing myself to feel it completely, that I could begin to move forward. It wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the loss didn't matter. The pain mattered. The love I had for my mother mattered. But I could no longer let it define me. I could no longer let it control the rest of my life. And so, I learned to live with it. I began to accept the things I could not change, the things that had been taken from me, and the things I had lost. I still thought of her every day. I still felt the weight of her absence in everything I did, in every step I took. But instead of letting it crush me, I started to carry it with me, like a heavy but familiar burden that was always there, but no longer weighed me down. I found that in accepting the loss, I found a new strength. It wasn't the strength to forget or to erase the pain, but the strength to keep living, to keep moving forward despite everything. It was the strength to find joy, even in the darkest of days. It was the strength to love again, to care for others, to live a life that honored the memory of the woman who had given me everything. I learned that moving forward didn't mean leaving the past behind. It didn't mean forgetting or letting go of what mattered. It simply meant finding a way to live with the past, to carry it with me, and to use it to fool the person I had become. I realized that my mother, in all her wisdom, had taught me how to survive, how to endure the hardest of times, and how to find hope even when everything seemed lost. And even though she was no longer physically with me, her spirit, her strength, and her love lived on in me. I could feel it in my bones, in the way I carried myself, in the way I faced each new day with a quiet resilience. And in that, I found peace. The peace that comes not from forgetting, but from accepting. The peace that comes not from erasing the pain, but from allowing it to be a part of my story, a part of who I was, and a part of who I would become. I no longer felt the need to search for answers, to try to make sense of the senseless. I no longer felt like I had to fix the broken pieces of my life. Instead, I simply accepted them as they were, knowing that they had shaped me into the person I had become. And that person, though scarred and battered by life, was strong, was resilient, and was ready to face whatever came next. My journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, still be pain, but now I knew how to carry it. I had learned the most important lesson of all, that even in the darkest of times, there is always a way to move forward, always a way to find peace, even when the world seems to have taken everything from you. And for that, I would forever be grateful. As I stand here, old and worn, I can feel the years stretching behind me, like a long road filled with memories, each one carved into my soul. There's not a single day that goes by without me thinking of her, of the woman who gave me everything, yet was stolen from me before I had the chance to repay her. But with time, I've learned that some debts are never meant to be repaid, no matter how much we try. Her love was a gift, one that I carry with me every step of the way. In my heart, I still hear her voice, whispering words of encouragement, even as the world around me continues to turn, indifferent to the pain and the struggle of those who have suffered. I've come to understand that the love she gave me is all I need to survive. It's the one thing they can never take from me, no matter how hard they try, and so I live with it, with her memory, with the lessons she taught me as I move through this world that has never been kind to people like us. My journey isn't just about surviving anymore. It's about honoring the love that shaped me, that carried me through every hardship, every moment of despair. It's about taking the broken pieces of my life and finding strength in them. Strength I never thought I'd have. And while the pain of the past will always be with me, I've learned to see it as part of my story, not the end of it. The love I carry, the lessons I've learned, they've given me the ability to keep going, to find peace in the chaos, to be whole again, in my own way. And I know that no matter what happens, no matter how much time passes, I will never forget her or the sacrifices she made for me, because in the end, it's not about what we lose, it's about what we carry with us. And I'll carry her always. I'll carry her love, her strength, her memory forever. If you've listened to my story, to the pain I've shared, then perhaps you understand. Perhaps you too carry something inside of you, a memory, a loss, a piece of yourself that you can't let go of. If that's you, then I ask you to stay, to keep listening, to keep carrying our stories forward. Maybe there's something here that can help you find your own peace, too. If you feel that, if you understand what I've said, then perhaps you'll join me and we'll keep walking this road together. You can find more of my story and the stories of others like me in the playlist. And I hope you'll subscribe so we can keep going, so we can keep remembering.